Hello and welcome. My name is Waldo and this is a Massey Ferguson 165 with a 4-cylinder Perkins diesel engine. This tractor is hard starting and doesn't sound right when it's running. In this video, I'm going to see if I can fix it. Over a year ago now, I rebuilt the engine for this tractor and it ran well for about a year. Late this winter, I went to start it and it was unusually hard to start. When it finally did start running, it sounded very weird. It sort of sounds like one of the cylinders is much louder than the others. The engine doesn't seem to have any blow-by, the oil looks good, and the coolant looks good. The head gasket appears to be fine, so for now I'll assume that's not causing a lack of compression. Let's turn the engine over to see what it sounds like. I've pulled the fuel shutoff knob so the engine won't start. If you listen closely, you can hear a sucking sound, like air is leaking somewhere it shouldn't be. Knowing this, I suspect the valves are seriously out of adjustment for one of the cylinders. To check, I'll need to remove the valve cover to measure the valve lash. Before I can access the valve cover, I need to remove the hood and the fuel tank. So, let's get to work. And with that, I have pretty good access to the valve cover. So let's see if I can get this thing off without damaging the cork gasket. Alright, well this is great. I got the valve cover off, the gasket is still intact, so I don't have to replace that. It looks nice and clean in there, so I'm just going to have to measure the clearance between the rocker arms and the valves. I'll have to rotate the engine around as needed, but... Alright, so I have cylinder number 1 here at top dead center with both the exhaust and intake valves closed. So now what I can do is I can use a feeler gauge to measure exactly what the clearance is. Now the clearance is supposed to be 12 thousandths of an inch cold. So, I got my 12 thousandths feeler gauge here, and let's stick it in the exhaust valve first. And it's actually not going in, it's pretty tight. And for the intake, it is actually going in, and there's some resistance here. So the intake valve is set perfectly, but the exhaust is not, so let's try 11 thou and see if this will fit in the exhaust. Still not fitting. 10 thou. Alright, 10 thou fits. So this, the exhaust valve is set 2 thousandths of an inch, I guess, tighter than it should be. So I'm going to have to adjust this. Alright, so to adjust this valve, the first thing I need to do is loosen the lock nut. nuts loose. And with the lock nut loose, I can move this adjusting screw here. Oh yes, alright, that worked. The 12th valve fits, but it's nice and snug. Okay, good. So those look good. So next I can turn the engine over half a turn, and let's see, the firing order is 1, 3, 4, 2. So I'll be adjusting cylinder number 3 next.
A few moments later.
Alright, now with cylinder number 3 at top dead center and both valves closed, I can measure these. Okay, so the intake valve is set perfectly, and it seems like the exhaust valve is a little tight. Yeah, alright, this is set to about 9 thousandths, so that's quite a bit off. So I'm going to have to adjust this exhaust valve too. So, alright, by the end of it, so I found that sticking the 17 thousandths feeler gauge in there when I tighten this up seems to work the best and gets it the closest to 12 thousandths at, after I tighten it up. Alright, now that all the valves are adjusted, I want to start this thing up to see if that fixes the issue. So I'm going to throw the valve cover back on, remount the fuel tank, and we'll start it up. As you can hear, the engine was still hard to start, and it also still sounds bad when running, so the valve adjustment did not fix the issue. After running the engine, I noticed this. If you look very closely, you can see a small amount of coolant periodically leaking out from underneath one of the cylinder head nuts. With coolant leaking from the cylinder head like that, I'm going to have to remove the cylinder head to see what's going on. Luckily, I have a quick and easy way to remove the fuel tank and the valve cover. With those removed, I can remove the fuel lines, the rocker assembly, and a few other things, and then I can start loosening head bolts and pull the cylinder head right off. I'll start by removing the exhaust manifold. it's time to remove the head gasket bolts, keeping in mind that there's actually a very specific order to loosen them up. And that helps to avoid warping the cylinder head. This is the one that the coolant was leaking out of, and it's coming out pretty rough. Alright, it's starting to come out. Alright, now that those are loose, I'm just going to use the impact to remove them the rest of the way quickly. Alright, and that's that. So I can just try to take this thing off. Oh, good. It's coming off pretty easily. It's loose. Alright, there we go. Hey. Oh. Oh my goodness. There's actually there's a break in the gasket between cylinders number 1 and 2. Like, the gasket's totally missing here. How did that happen? That actually might have been my problem. And just so you can see it, here's a close-up of the blown head gasket between cylinders number 1 and 2. We still have plenty of crosshatch on the cylinders. Alright, so I've checked the mating surfaces of both the cylinder head and the block, and I don't see any issues there. They look pretty good. One thing I did notice is that some of the threads of the cylinder head studs are a little bit messed up, a little bit gummed up, so that might have caused this problem. To remedy that, I've gone ahead and run a 7/16 fine thread die over some of the studs to clean up the threads. The nut that was on this stud here actually had stripped threads, so that probably explains the leaking coolant. So what can happen is when your threads are a little bit dirty or a little bit messed up, it causes extra friction when you're tightening it. That can cause you to reach your torque value before it's actually providing enough clamping force onto the head gasket. Because I don't see any other problems here, I'm going to move forward and assume that may have been the issue. I'm going to pay extra careful attention to torquing things down properly, and I'm going to go ahead and reassemble it, and hopefully the issue doesn't happen again. This graphic shows the tightening sequence of the cylinder head nuts, numbered 1 through 23. Alright, so the service manual calls for torquing the cylinder head nuts down to 55 to 60 foot-pounds. Just to be safe, I'm going to do it in the correct order, and I'm actually going to do it in 3 stages. First I'm going to torque them all down to 20 foot-pounds, then to 40 foot-pounds, and then I'll tighten them down to their final torque spec of 58 foot-pounds. Alright, there we go. That felt pretty good. Last night I finished putting all the mechanical stuff on the tractor back together. Before I do the body work, I want to bleed the air out of the fuel system and get the engine running. I've cracked these 2 injector lines, so I'm going to go turn the engine over, and when fuel starts coming out of these, then it's ready. So let me know when that happens. Oh, fuel's coming out of this one. All right. We'll call it good. Alright, with those 2 fuel lines bled, let's see if this thing starts up. It's going to be pretty loud because I haven't attached the muffler yet. Well, it sounds like the engine's running great. Next, I have to put the bodywork back together. And with that, I'm ready to put this tractor back to work. It feels really good to have this machine back in service. For the last several months, I've been able to use dyno to take up some of the slack, but for some things you simply need a tractor with a 3-point hitch and a PTO. In fact, I think there's a good chance I'll be buying another tractor or two at some point in the future. I wouldn't mind having a smaller tractor and a larger tractor for a variety of different tasks. Let me know down in the comments if you'd like to see more videos of this tractor. This summer I'll be expanding my food plot, which involves clearing out rocks, plowing the field, and then broadcasting fertilizer and seed. I also have a loader for this tractor, which I'll probably install at some point. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, let me know down below. Thank you for watching.